you know, my dad um, he had a little welding business when I was a little kid. And, he built a lot of wrought iron and different things like that in Las Vegas. And, you know, as a little kid, I'd be out there 6 or 7 years old with to clean the steel back then, it was gasoline and a rag. You know, they didn't use like cleaner. It was old school, gas and a rag. I remember that. And anyway, I'd clean that square tubing for my dad, and he would cut it all up and then weld it into something, and I was kind of sweep the shop, clean up things around. And, I actually had a great opportunity to go to work with my dad. Nowadays you can't do that, I don't think, anymore, so, but I mean, to get into detail about it, it's like the dirtiness of it and the bleeding and the sweat is what really, I just seen my dad doing it, and I'm like, this is so cool, like he's a real man. Like it just inspired me to be like that. And I wanted to, and then once I kind of learned how to weld a little bit, I used to build when I was about 16 years old, I used to build these flatbeds. Like I'm talking 36-foot flatbeds that went on we would order these trucks, and they would come with a cab and chassis, and then I would build a flatbed for them. And it was out in the dirt in the parking lot with a stick welder. And, I learned how to put things together. I learned how to weld an uphill pass. I learned how to manipulate metal on any way I could. Sometimes if I had a piece of equipment up there, instead of just sitting there running uphills all day long, I would take the piece, flip it on its side, and just run it straight across. That way, like basically a T-joint, it would save me so much time, and you learn how to do that as you get experience in welding. And it's like, there's so many different avenues you can go with it. But this was my avenue. We had a steel business. My dad started a little steel company, and basically, once it grew, we had shears and rebar machines that would break constantly. And so my job was to weld them all back together. And, I never really went to school. I didn't really have anybody teach me. My dad was so busy, he didn't have time to mess with me, to learn. So basically I would just go over and look at somebody's weld and then try to match it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? When I was little, that's how I learned I kind of self-taught a little bit. And, man, when I got a MIG welder, I thought life was like, wow, this is great. You know what I mean? But the key thing about that stick welding, starting off in my life being, with a stick welder, it really is the core to welding no matter what. Like it develops the TIG welding, it develops the MIG welding. And, of course, acetylene welding is something you should learn first. I mean, that's a great way. And I don't think nowadays most kids know anything about acetylene welding really, because they're so available with a MIG welder. And there's so much you can do with learning how to acetylene weld too, and being in the automotive world, every mechanic out there should know how to weld with a torch. They really should, because you can weld brass fittings back together. You can make things. You can patch holes in a line that you wouldn't think would be fixable. And it's part of being the mechanic. Of course, nowadays, I mean, things are so parts exchanged that, the old school mechanics kind of going away, but I think really it was just the fact of, being around my dad at that time and really seeing what a man has to do to get up and go to work every day. I mean, that was really that really inspired me, and, once you develop that and you're basically on your own, you have that skill to go forward, and then it just feels good. It's freedom. It really is. So I have two sons. One's 21, one's 22. They both know how to weld. They can fabricate. They know how to build stuff. I mean, they're still young, you know what I mean? So they're learning every day. But whether they take it off to be their future or not, it's good to know it. Mm-hmm. For instance, you know, when you start off learning how to put things together, know how to weld, and basically you become your own engineer as a fabricator too. Like you manipulate things and you make it work. And once you've learned how to put things together, and in the future, let's say that you're not welding as much anymore, but you're running a crew, you know what I mean? And you can already say you've been there and done that. Like, I already know kind of how that goes together. So I think as a young man, it's a great trade to learn how to get in there and get the experience. You know, like I said, anybody could really kind of weld if they wanted to, but the experience of it is something you cannot pay for. You can't go get that. There's nothing you can do, not even on my course. I can show you shortcuts on how to get there and give you my, basically my shortcuts to getting you started. But the only way to really become a great welder is to be out there in the mix of it and have your paycheck on the line and know that you could get fired. Because once your butt is on the line, it's going to make you better because you don't want to fail. And once you have that and you pick a job up and you're like scared, because I've done it before. Like, I've got a job and I'm like, oh my gosh, man, I've never done this before. I don't know really what I'm doing. Once you get involved in it and you really start to put traction down on the job and you're like, okay, then you start flowing with it. But the only way that it flows is if you have that experience. And, you know, I asked a lot of old guys that were welders back in the old days, like, questions. And, you know, we didn't have Weld.com to go to. And like these guys that you have on there that are so skilled and like have the answer. We didn't have social media. So it was just, well, screw it up 3 or 4 times till you get it figured out. Or, you know, ask these old guys. That's kind of how I did it. I was like, you know, find these guys that are like 60, 70 years old that have been welding for 40 years. And, you know, most of those guys have forgot more crap than most guys have ever known, you know. And so it was always really cool to be able to, you know, pick the brains of these old guys and like watch their technique and follow through with them because they just got it. But like I said, now today you can get online and you can kind of research welding and learn it quick. But you can watch as many welding videos as you want, but you got to get your butt up out of the chair and you got to go apply it to learn how it feels to be there. It looks good. And especially like a lot of these guys on Weld.com, it's like, okay, that is such a pretty weld and it's so beautiful what they just did. Most guys are like, there's no way I'm going to do that the first time. And it isn't. You're just not. So like I said, with this welding course, and it's just a MIG course, you know, it's basically just teaching you how to turn the machine on and get some gas flowing and where to set it up and which, you know, what element you're in and where at, and get you started. And I think once people get started with a MIG welder, they'll enjoy welding. Stick welding is kind of frustrating, but when I started, that's really kind of all I had to mess with. So, but most guys, anything that makes fire and sparks, they're all into it. And that's serious. Like, I love it because of it, you know, smoke and fire and, you know, it's just cool. Unfortunately, in today's generation, work ethic it's just falling apart. I mean, you know, I feel like, you know, like my granddad was a World War II vet. Their work ethic was unbelievable. They went to war to die. No cell phones, no, nothing. They couldn't call nobody. It was like, get on the bus, and good luck. I hope I see you when it's over. When them guys got out of war, they really went to inventing things and building more stuff. You know what I mean? Like some of the craftsmanship of what they were doing back then. You got to think, this is a generation that came from the Great Depression as children. So, you know, that generation had no choice but to have to work. The baby boomers, which is my dad's generation, they got their butts kicked by a World War II vet, right? Well, my generation is, my dad is I'm a grandson of a World War II vet. Well, every generation that it goes down, it gets just weaker and weaker and weaker. And the reason why is because there's an excuse for everything. There's an excuse for everything. No one is accountable anymore. World War II vets were too proud to know that they would never file bankruptcy. They would have never not made their payments. They would have figured some way to not have to make a payment on what they have. So they didn't really overextend themselves like we do now. So now people have such an excuse to just be lazy, you know? And, you know, the immigrants that's come into this country is kind of taken over a lot of the work ethic for these younger kids that we have in our own country that really need to be out doing it. Because of WelderUp and because of what I've done, I have a generation below me of these great kids that are interested in it. And that's why I did Welder 101, is because I have all these young guys that really are interested in it, but their dads aren't welders. Their dads weren't welders. You know, it could have been from the millennial generation where it was in between all of that. And the millennial kids are having kids. And those kids are the ones that want to learn how to weld right now. You know what I mean? And even the dads want to learn how to weld. I still think that we have some backbone in this country that, and I really honestly think that it starts with these guys that have trades, you know, and welding to me is just badass. I would say that if you're starting out, take it as a learning lesson for the first year or two. Don't overcharge somebody for your work. Take it as a learning curve and learn how to charge people for what you're doing as you get better. Because there's guys out there that are worth, you know, $20 an hour, and there's guys out there worth $120 an hour. And, you know, really pick and choose what you know and practice on that before you move up and move up. I mean, sometimes you have to take a risk, and that's part of growing your business. But remember that if you're only into this for the first year, take it as a college course and you're getting paid for it. Because the biggest thing about a beginner welder is the experience. And what I mean by that is, like, not just welding. If you pull up on a job and you got a truck and you're like, okay, I'm here to weld, and I've done this before, so this is how I know. You got to cut something with a cutoff wheel that's precise, and you forgot all your cutoff wheels, or you forgot your welding hood. I've done that before in my shop. I've been using my welding hood in my shop, and I forget to load it in my truck. I drive 40 miles out there. Well, you can't charge that guy to turn around, drive back, and get your welding helmet. So it's experience. It's like, okay, get two welding helmets, one for your shop and one for your truck. That way you're saving yourself and that guy time. But the only person that really has to pay for that experience is you. And you can't really charge a customer that, because he won't call you back. But sometimes if you come in humble and you say, hey, I don't really know everything about what I'm doing here, but I'm going to try to get it done, they'll call you back on the next one only because you're trying. If you know, a lot of guys they won't even try it, you know, which maybe is a good thing too. But I would say if you're starting off, if you got a shop at your house or your shop, wherever, you know, set yourself a flat rate of what you think you're worth at that moment. And then as you get more experience, just charge more, because that means you can go out there and do it actually in half the time it took you before. So it all pays the same, really. It's just experience, you know? What it really comes down to is, you know, how obsessed are you on being successful? You follow me? Like, there's levels of it. You know, like with me, sacrifices have to be made to be successful. And sometimes it's your relationship, sometimes it's your kids, sometimes it's, you know, your family. They take the worst hit. And, you know, a lot of time it's one or the other. Either you can stay home all day and pick and choose your jobs and make okay money, or you can become obsessed with it and make a lot of money, but sacrifices are made on both sides of the fence. It really depends on how far you want to go. It's hard to even it out, especially if you're married and you have kids. My advice is, if this is what you love to do, then surround yourself around it and try to make it work where they're close to you, but you still can work 12 hours a day. I mean, that's me. I mean, my relationship when I was married didn't last forever because I was obsessed with my work, you know? Did I take my kids fishing a lot? Not really. I mean, we raced dirt bikes together. We rodeoed. My kids junior rodeoed and raced dirt bikes. That's it. We didn't go really camping. We didn't do that kind of stuff because we worked 7 days a week. And then what you do is your kids learn that that's what they're going to do when they get older. And it's like, it's just not all fun. You know what I mean? Unless you enjoy what you do, and if you're obsessed with what you're doing, then it's not that bad. You just got to figure out how to balance it out amongst everybody. And not everybody's always happy, but this is your life, and you have to figure out what sacrifices need to be made to be successful. And that's what it comes down to. It's something I never thought I would do, but probably in 2005 or 6, a lady called me on the phone just randomly and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a welder. I've got 2 chimpanzees and I need to build some cages." At first I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, is this a prank?" You know, because this was in Montana, you know, at the time. And I was like, "All right, well, look, maybe I'll run out and take a look and see what you got." Because I was, more than anything, I was just curious to see what exactly she was talking about. So anyway, I went out there. Sure enough, she's got these 2 chimpanzees, right? And they're like babies at the time. They're little guys. But so I started off by building her a little chimpanzee cage in her kitchen, literally in her house. And then it went from that to building these cages that she puts in her Hummer to haul the chimpanzees around. And then she grew out of that house with these chimpanzees. So in the meantime, I had to build her this big cage inside of her office at work. And she was a real estate agent. So I built these big cages in her office. And then she moves to a bigger house. And I had to kind of like reinstall the stuff I already built inside of her house. But she bought it because it had a big garage on it. So basically, I turned this garage into, like, I'm telling you, like a 4,000 square foot chimpanzee cage. Okay. And then I went on the outside of it and I built like this monster playground out of 3-inch woven wire rock screen. Basically, I built it out of rock screen because they're so strong inside this facility. On the pillars that were in the middle, I made them look like trees, so they could swing on the trees, and it was all fully encaged. I mean, it was like a year project of like all of this, right? And I made these like really like intricate sliding doors that you would have to slide them open. They would go into this one room and then you would latch it so they could feed, so they could basically clean the cage while they're in there, because, those chimpanzees are kind of nasty, you know what I mean? And if they get a hold of you, these are little ones and they're strong. And full grown, they're like, 10 times stronger than a man. So whatever I built for them was like super strong. Like you couldn't get out of them. Like it was probably stronger than a prison. And I had to make these feed troughs that basically flipped back and forth, where you'd put the food in it and then it would flip to feed them. But as it shut, they wouldn't be able to reach their hand in there and grab you, because if they grab a hold of your arm, they'll pull it off. Like they're pretty strong. So there's a perfect example of being a welder with maybe a little bit of creativity. Didn't know nothing about chimpanzee cages. Never don't know nothing about primates. Don't know nothing about any of that stuff. But I guess the challenging part of it was, okay, you got to look at the strength of these animals, how athletic they are, how much they want to climb around and play. And, it wasn't something that I'm really into, but at that time I had to get into it because I need to learn what these animals were doing, and, it's just one of those things that it's probably not the craziest thing I've ever done, but it's probably one of the most unique things that I did, because you just never know what phone call you're going to get when you're a welder. You just don't know. I mean, if you got a welder in the back of your truck, yeah, conversations get really weird because you never know what people want you to build. But that was one that I thought was pretty crazy. I've done some really hard, like rolled over. I remember one time I had to weld this guy's it was a big, huge water tank, and he rolled it, and it caved the whole side of the tank in. It was 40 foot long, but the insurance company was going to pay him to repair it. So, we're talking 3/8 inch thick rolled plate, and I had to get the plate rolled perfectly and cut the whole side out, crawl inside of it, cut all the baffles out of it. And I mean, it was one of those jobs that I didn't think, I was like, I've never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing. And it turned out really good by the time it was over. And, there's just, I don't know, there's hundreds of different things I could probably think of. One of the craziest things though, that I got to tell you real quick is I get a phone call one day. I'm portable at this time. I had a portable welding truck back in 2001 to 2010. And a lady called me, or a guy called me, said, hey, I need my wheelchair welded together. And I was wondering if you could come over and weld this wheelchair. And I'm like, man, I hate to do like little jobs like that because I'm, it's not really paying me a ton of money. He goes, look, I'm in the wheelchair, like I'm crippled from the waist down. And when I move it back, it flips me over. And I'm like, oh man, I felt bad for this guy, right? So I go, I'll come look at it. So I go downtown, and he works in an office. He's a successful businessman. He runs this wheelchair basically with like his finger, and he's seriously like crippled from the waist down. And I go, well, I mean, how do we get you out of it? And he goes, I really can't get out of it. So I go, all right, well, come out to the parking garage. So I take this guy out in the parking garage. I ratchet strap him to the side of my truck, and I ratchet strap this thing back into place, crawl underneath this wheelchair, and weld these brackets back together that were broken in there with him in it. And I'm like, what gets crazier than this? You know what I mean? It was just insane. So I think the fun of the welding is that you just never know what you're going to do. And I think that's what makes it so exciting too.
Hey guys, Steve Darnell here from WelderUp and the hit show Vegas Rat Rods on Discovery Channel. Listen, I've put together a beginner welding course for you guys.
There's 280 territories worldwide that watch me on TV. I'm more popular actually in Europe, Canada, Brazil is a huge following. The United States, yeah, but worldwide is more for me. And what happens is you become an iconic figure in the welding world, and people want to know about it. So they're always asking me, what kind of welder do you use? Where do I learn how to weld? How can I do it? And that's why I got into this, is because I've become a face to influence people. And it just naturally happened. It wasn't something that I planned on doing. It's just naturally happening because I'm like, well, I've got all these followers that are following me between Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and they have questions. Now, how can I put this all together? Well, I sat down in my shop and I literally did 200 hours of welding and explaining to edit it into 10 hours. So people can actually listen to it. And if they're going to pay for this course, then they're going to want to learn. If it's free, people don't really take it that serious. But if you got to pay for this and sit down and watch 10 hours of Steve Darnell in your face, and when you learn and you want to come to the shop at WelderUp, and we put together a deal where you can come here and I'll give you your money back on your course to buy the course in the shop, it's just an incentive for you to come and take it to the next level. And those are the people I want to teach because they want to do it. But I think that's what it has to come down to, is how bad do you really want it? And if you're going to pay for it, then you're going to want to do it. Right? Of course, I love to decorate. I'm a decorating fool. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you come in here and you dump off a truckload of old antiques, I could decorate a restaurant in about 2 days. Cool. And I like that kind of stuff. That's kind of a fun hobby. It just takes my mind away. I get very creative. I like, if you've seen the cars that I build on TV, I get obsessed with it to where I live it. And the only way to really make something look the way you want is you have to live it for that time. So every car that I did, when I built, there was one on there called the clown car. I don't know if you ever seen it, but I built the clown car. It had a blown big block Chevy in it. I slept with my headphones in with creepy clown music for 2 weeks. I was so creeped out, and I had clowns trying to kill me in my sleep. I would come to work in a different frame of mind. I was completely obsessed with how it looked when it was done. And that's how they all turn out, is I have to live them. So, and I guess, building cars on the side of being a welder was my hobby. And then I turned it into a job. And so I guess being creative like that is my hobby. Really, it's fun for my brain to think about crazy cool stuff. Women want to weld. They love it. They think it's so cool. And, you look online now, you got all these girls out there that are welding and they're good. I met one up in Montana. She's a young girl, probably in her 20s. She works all day in a structural shop welding all day. And actually, I have her coming to, she's going to come down to Vegas because I want to take her through the shop and show her around. But she's a good influencer. And she's not like one of those ones that's really heavy on her social media, because she's not allowed to have her phones in her work area. But she's hardcore. She's in there all day with men working her butt off and welding and loves it. She loves it. So, and she's making a great living doing it. And it just cracks me up to think that these girls are in there out welding these dudes. It's just, I don't know. These guys are over working at Starbucks and this girl's over here freaking throwing I-beams around, putting passes on it and building flanges and drilling holes and running a bridge crane and wearing a hard hat, and she's more badass than he is, you know? So these boys better look out, because these girls, man, they're getting tough, you know? They have no choice, you know? So I just love it. It's a good world for everybody to get involved in. I don't care who you are, what color you are, where you come from. It's a great trade.